Hello everybody and welcome to the studio. My name is Mel and I'm here to teach you how to paint. I have been doing this a long time, over 6 years, and I've taught thousands of people how to paint one step at a time. So that's how we're going to do it today. So I'm glad that you're here. If you're a little nervous, relax. It's okay. I'm going to break everything down into bite-sized pieces. So whether this is your first painting or your 20th, I've got you. I'm going to hold your hand the whole way. So first, let's talk a little bit about what we're painting today. We have our golden sunflower on this wooden plaque. I love these wooden plaques. They're just something fun and different to paint on, and they look great in just about any decor. So I'm glad that you made this choice. If you're painting it on canvas, it's going to be equally as lovely. And you could even paint the background to look like wood if you wanted to go a little more rustic. That's something that you can do. But these are just basic shapes. I know it may look a little bit intimidating, but we're really going to just break it down into bite-sized pieces and take it one step at a time. Now, let's talk about the equipment that we're using today. We've got two brushes. We've got a big brush, and then we've got a smaller brush. The big brush is flat on the top, and the smaller brush is pointy. So if you ordered the kits, that's what you're going to have. But you could really use any large or smaller brush as long as you can get the desired line. You know how to use them. Pick your tool. I've got a cup of water. I use an old jar, so it's pretty grungy. Filled halfway up with cool water. I like cool water because hot water will melt the glue that holds your brush together. And we also have, I use an old rag. Paper towels are great. I just use the old one. It gets a little crusty, but eventually I save a few trees. My mother would be proud. And I've got my palette, and I'm using a plastic palette. I prefer to use a plastic palette or a parchment or wax paper as a mixing surface, because when I'm mixing on a paper plate, it tends to soak up all of my paint. I paint half the plate and then I need to make more, and it sort of turns into this self-defeating process. So a plastic lid works great, like one of those mix-match lids from your Tupperware. Grab it. It'll make a great palette. Okay, so I've got two yellows. I've got a lemony yellow and an egg yolk yellow. We've got white. You can't really see that because of the camera in the background. We've got brown, black, and metallic gold. That's all we need. So that's what we're using today. I do have a paper plate. You can use any old plate or Tupperware lid, but it'll make a great tracing surface to get that center of the sunflower in. I believe in making things easy, working smart, not hard. We should be drinking while we're painting, so we should at least be able to have a little fun, right? And I've got a piece of chalk. I also sent that out in your kit, and that'll help us to just sort of sketch things out. So get yourself all set up, grab what you need, and when you're ready, let's get rolling. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I've zoomed in a little bit so you get a better view of the action. Remember, if you're viewing on a device like your phone or your laptop, you can actually zoom in on the video. So if you want to get any up close and tight shots as I'm working, just take your mouse and zoom in, and you should be able to do that on YouTube so that you can get a better view. I just figured that out last week. I was this many years old when I discovered it. Okay. So let's start by sketching out the shape of our sunflower. We're going to make that super simple. First thing is take your round plate or lid, whatever you're using, and you want it to be, I've got the top of the lid coming out, or excuse me, the plate coming about halfway up this second slat here, and then I'm about halfway across. So I'm just going to find the halfway spot here and line up. That gets me about halfway up that second slat. And then I'm just going to trace this piece of a circle. That's it. Just trace that out. When you're using chalk, especially on wood, you want to make your lines as light as possible. So don't go over them a lot. You're going to leave a lot of chalk dust on your surface, and that'll get in your brush bristles with your paint. It gums things up, makes it a little mucky. So I'm going to use a really bright line so that you can see it on the camera, but I want you to just try to be delicate with your chalk lines. All right, so we've got our half circle in, and we're going to start creating these rows of petals. And we're going to start with the forward petals. because then for the back ones, all we have to do is make this extra little piece. So we're going to leave a little bit of a gap. You can see here they're about 3 fingers across, but I do have really big hands. So maybe a little over an inch and a half, not quite 2. But it doesn't really matter as long as they're fairly consistent. Now, the beautiful thing about doing a sunflower is every single petal doesn't have to be the same size and exactly the same shape. Because it's a flower, it's organic, everything's going to be just a little bit different, which is very forgiving and makes life much easier for us. So I'm going to start here with this top one, just leaving a little bit of a gap. I'm going to make the point right at the top of my painting surface and make a parenthesis. Then I'm going to start up at the top, meeting that first point, and come back down, leaving a little bit of a gap. Just like that. I'm going to come around and do it again. You can almost sort of trace the outer edge if you want, so that you've got a little line to guide you. I just made a little light dash there, so I know how long to make the petals. Another parenthesis, and I'm just going to keep repeating this process. And look, that one got a little wonky. Don't care. Doesn't even matter. Let's make another one here. So I've got 4. You may end up with 5. It's all good. Doesn't matter. Now, if you need to, hit the pause button and get that first row in. Like I said, don't fiddle with them too much, because the lines are going to change again as we paint, because the bristles will move. And so we're just going to try to accept the process and trust it. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that second row in the back. Now I'll start up here at the top again, and I'm just going to create one little edge, because the rest of this is really behind the petal in front of it and out of our point of view. So we can come over to the next gap, and all we have to do is create this little pointy section. Now, some of them should be a little longer than others. We don't want every single petal to be exactly the same height, because it sort of loses its organic nature. But again, that will change as we paint it. And it was really that simple. So if you need to, go ahead and hit the pause button, and I'll be here when you get back, and we'll start working on the painting. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so now we're going to start with our painting. And we're going to begin with these partial back, this back row of our sunflower petals. So I'm going to use my bigger brush. It's about a 1/2 inch wide with a flat top. I'm just going to call it our big brush. And you can see here the back row is a little bit darker. So we're going to start with that. I'm just giving my brush a little dip in the water to just get the bristles a little bit moist. Let me show you. Just a quick little dunk. And then I just drag the bristles along the edge of the cup. And that helps squeegee out any excess water. If it's drippy, you can give it a little pat on your paper towel. And the first thing I'm going to do is pick up that darker yellow, that egg yolk yellow. It's almost orange. And I'm going to start filling in this back row of petals. And it's going to look funky because that wood is immediately going to drink up that paint. It's very thirsty. And the brown underneath gives it almost a sort of greenish hue. Don't worry about it. We're going to do one layer and then come back and do a second. But we've got to get this first coat on. It's sort of like a primer if you were painting a wall. Or your face, right? Because we use primer on our face. All right. And I'm not worrying too much about the left and right edges. I want to make sure that I at least come a little bit past where that next row of petals is going to be. So they look almost complete as I paint them. And you can see I'm just fiddling a little bit here with this little edge to make sure I don't get big lops of paint in there. I'm going to keep working my way around every other one. Let the edges get a little funky if they go that way. Flower petals get funky. And we're just going to fill this in. Just get that filled in. And keep going. I guess I'm running out of things to say already, but It's the same process. Oh, that got a little wonky. That's okay. I'll just work with it. Now the next layer is going to give us much better coverage. And it is raining and really humid where I am today, and this wood is still just drinking everything up. So my first ones, they're almost done. Almost dried up. And that's it. That's the first layer. Pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty much color by numbers, right? Okay, so give these just a moment to dry. You can hit them with a blow dryer if you'd like. That'll speed things along for you. But don't keep going over it. You want to let it all dry. It's really important. As it starts to partially dry, if we fiddle with it too much, what's going to end up happening is you'll peel that paint surface off, and then it's going to leave a little pock mark, and if you have any type of hennu, it's going to annoy the bejesus out of you. So make sure that you don't fiddle with it too much. Let it dry. When we come back, the next layer will go on, and you'll get much better coverage, I promise. Just trust me. All right, see you in a second. Let it dry. We'll come back and do the next row. All right, so I'm pretty much dry now, and I'm going to come in and do the next layer. But this time, I'm going to double dip some paint. And it's okay, it's not guacamole at a party. No one's going to get mad at you. Just make sure you come into the edge of your puddle of paint. And I'm just getting a little bit of white. Let me put that up against my hand. Just a little bit. And then what you want to do is go back to that same dark yellow. Again, use that edge of the paint puddle so that you don't get it all glopped up. And then start at the top and work your way down in one sort of long stroke. I like to use the edge of the brush to get the edge of that petal. It'll help make it a little clearer. And we may need to come in with one more coat on this, but you can see they go really quickly and really easy. So I guess, we could have to work harder, but smaller steps building up this layer of coverage because of the wood and the paint. We sort of have to work with the mediums and the surface. See, now the edge gets a little funky there because of that grain in the wood. And if I just use that skinny edge of the brush and I'm delicate, there we go. I can pull a nice clean edge. And just up and down, consistent movements, trying to give a little bit more texture, taking a moment, just pulling out any little excess bits there. Little curve, that'll help. If you follow that curve, it's going to help give some shape and dimension to those petals. And we're going to do this again. Tiny bit of white, tiny bit of that dark yellow. And again, start at that tip, work your way down. Curve long strokes. That little crack is going to get filled up and messy. Don't worry about it quite yet. Get your edges going. Get them nice and clean. And then you can just come in and pull down and up. And that'll help clean those up. And I still see a lot of texture in my brush strokes on this paint, so I can tell you right now I'm probably going to have to do another layer. And we'll make that one just a little bit darker to give us some depth. So, rinse and repeat. It's like Groundhog's Day around here today. A little white, a little bit of the dark yellow. Do it again. And you can see we're almost there, right? We're getting much better coverage, but it's just not quite enough. So we'll just keep going. Just keep going. A little more white, a little more dark yellow, and finish this bottom one up. There we go. So remember, I'm on video, so you can pause me at any point and just take your time with this. Don't try to put the paint on thicker to achieve what you're going for here quicker. It's really counterproductive. The paint gets gooey and gummy, and it doesn't really give you better coverage. So take your time with it, hit it with the blow dryer in between layers if you need to, but go ahead and give me a pause, get through this round. I'm gonna hit mine with the blow dryer, and when we come back, we should be hitting it with our third and final layer. All right, I'll be right back. All right, we're back. I know that feels just a little bit fussy, having to do layer after layer, but they're fairly quick and easy, so it's really not too terribly taxing. I think that breaking the steps down into easier bits in total add up to a better piece. We're more comfortable, our work turns out better, and we really end up having a better overall experience, which is what it's all about, right? You can go out and buy any kind of art, you're making it because you want to have some fun doing it. Okay, so we're going to come back in and do one more layer. Same brush, the larger brush, with that darker yellow. So I'm going to grab some dark yellow by itself this time and come in and just start pulling that down. It's still pretty translucent. But now, once I get that on, I can decide whether to use a little bit of brown or a little bit of white to give it a little more oomph. And for the back row, I think I'm going to use a little bit of brown. So I'm not cleaning my brush. Coming over, just grabbing a tiny, tiny bit of that brown. And just one or two quick swooshes. That got a little heavy. So let that be a lesson to you. Just going to try to wipe that out a little. I'll just sort of pat off that extra paint. Sometimes these things happen, so just take tiny bits. Some more of that dark yellow. And you can see it's getting a lot more shape and definition to it. This is where everything really is starting to come together on these petals. Little tiny bit of brown this time. I'll dab the extra off. There we go. Little streaks. And I'm going to pull this closer for you to see for just a moment here. Do you see those streaks? That's what we want. I call that hit it and quit it streaking. Just a quick little pop to give it just a little more definition. Now I'm fiddling with it too much. Okay. And we're going to rinse and repeat here without rinsing. Grabbing a little bit more of that dark yellow. Just trying to get a little bit more definition of our color, a little more lusciousness there. And then a little tiny bit of brown. Dabbing it off. Follow that little curve. If you mess with this too much, you end up with a whole brand new color. So be mindful, and that curve is going to give a little bit more shape to that petal. 2 more to go. Oh, I feel like an aerobics instructor. 1 more. 2 more. Oh, I had a lot of brown left in my brush this time. And that worked out okay. I'm not mad about it. I'm going to come in with just a little bit more. There we go. And then the last one. Yellow and just a tiny little streak of some brown in there to create that shadow. All right. I'm going to try not to fiddle with those. Put my brush in the water and grab my blow dryer. So go ahead and pause, and I'll be back in just a second. All right, well that wasn't too bad, right? What'd that take us? About 20 minutes to get that first layer in, including our sketch. So we're doing okay. Now we're going to come in and add the second row, the most forward row of petals. So that's why we did the back ones first, and now we'll do the forward ones. That just helps us really build in some dimension and depth there without having to get too crazy or technical about it. So I want to use my big brush. I'm going to give it a cleaning. Just give it a little gentle sweep with a little bounce on the bottom of your cup, and it'll knock those bristles loose. And then drag them across the edge like you're scraping a spatula on the side of the bowl. A little press into your paper towel or drying surface. And we're going to use lighter yellow this time. And we're going to follow that same sort of process. Except I want to start off with a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow. We're going to double dip that first layer. And again, try not to make every single one exactly the same as the one next to it. As humans, we tend to create patterns, and we don't really want to do that too much here. We've got a lot of pattern just in the shape of the sunflower. And I'm a little type A. I don't know about you. So it's very easy for me to try to make everything symmetrical. But it's nature, it's a flower. It's not supposed to be. So those long strokes, and you'll see this lighter yellow with the white just from the jump is going to give us better coverage. But we want it a little lighter and brighter. So that works. Going to grab a little more white, a little more yellow, come over to the next one. And I am overlapping the edge of the petal next to me. Keep that swoop in the curve of your edges. That's what's going to give you some roundness and dimension to the shape of your petal. This layer doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to come back over it. We're just putting down sort of that primer base layer. The more you mess with the edges, the bigger your petals are going to get. So try to leave, as I say, a little room to grow. Sweep, ooh, that spot's thirsty. A little more white, a little more yellow. Every time I dip, I just try to get equal amounts of the light yellow and the white. And then I come in and fiddle with that little slat. Try to get those long strokes as far as you can. It's okay to overlap this inner circle here. We're going to cover that up, so we're not going to worry about it. And I got one more here. Little white, little light yellow. There we go. Last one. So at any point, you can pause me to get caught up. I paint faster than you. I'm the professional. That's my job. I'm supposed to. We'll get you there. It's not a race. You're supposed to be relaxing. You can always just hit the pause, get caught up, and come back. I'll still be here. I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to hit this with the dryer. I'll be back in a minute. I'll see you then. All right, we're ready for round 2 on this forward layer of petals. So I'm still working with that big brush, and I'm grabbing little bits of white, and this time I'm going to grab more yellow than white. And we're going to do it again. Start at the very outer tip and use that curved stroke going long all the way down to where it meets the center. That's what we need to do. All right. And I don't have a lot of streaks in here, and that's okay. Little bits of white, way more yellow. And you can see there's a pretty big difference between our back layer and our front layer of petals. So we may need to go in and do some adjustments, some fine details, but we'll be able to do that at the end once we have the center in, because we'll be able to make better decisions then. So if you're anything like me, you're looking at it going, oh, there's a big difference there, we're going to come in and adjust it at the end. Because once we get that center in, we'll know what all of the colors are going to look like against each other, and we'll be able to provide better balance and make better decisions. Now, I don't think we're going to need to do another or a third layer on these yellow ones. If you feel like you need to, go right ahead. I know that we're going to be adding little bits of highlight to them when we do that final adjustment pass after we get done with our center. So I think I'll save any further detailing for then. But it's your process and your project, so if you want to plan on drying and then adding a third layer, go ahead. Do whatever makes you more comfortable. It's your piece. All right, my last one here. Real quick and easy like. There we go. Not going to fiddle with them too much more. I'm going to let them be. And now I'm going to start the center. So when you're ready, come on back. I'll be here. And we'll get that center going. All right, I'll see you in a second. Okay, so we are ready to start the center. I'm going to get my brush clean. You want to just give it a good bounce or sweep on the bottom of that cup. Mine got pretty full of paint, so I'm going to do it a few times. Drag those bristles, squeegee out that excess water, and press into my paper towel or my paint rag here. And I am going to mix a little bit of black and brown together to give me that base tone that we're going to use for our center of our petal there. So I'm going to start by taking a good scoop of brown, about the size of a martini olive, a green one. There we go. And then I'm going to start with about half that amount in black. I want 2 to 1 brown to black. And we'll give it a swirl. Try to mix and keep your pile small. We're using our brush. If you're using a palette knife to mix, then you can always scrape. But we don't want to paint our palette. We want to keep everything in a little puddle there. And it can have some swirls because we're going to add all of this variety to create texture, so swirls are a good thing. And the first thing I'm going to do is just use a simple back and forth sweeping stroke to get this first layer on. And just like with our petals, you may find that the wood is drinking up your paint. That's okay. We're going to come back and add more. Before I pick up any more paint, I'm just going to take a very tiny dip of the tip of my bristles into my water and then pick up some paint. That'll help move the paint along a little bit more smoothly on this thirsty, dry surface. Little dip, grab some more. And I'm not worrying about the edge yet. You can see I've come from that bottom corner and I'm working my way out to the edge. Just getting this cool little dip in the water, little dip in the paint. Now I'm hitting that edge. And I don't need it to be perfect because I'm going to come along and mess it up. I'm going to stipple and tap, and that's going to create some more texture to it. It's also going to help it overlap the bottom of our petals a little bit more effectively. So don't worry about your circle remaining a perfect curve. We're going to mess it up anyway. I'm just trying to get this first primer sort of undercoat here so that we can continue. But that's all we've got to do is get that first layer on. And then you guessed it, we're going to let it dry. And while it dries, we'll go back and fiddle with our petals one more time. And then we'll know what to do. So we don't have much left. I would say maybe about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you want to take a break, this might be a good time to do it. You, of course, are in complete control of that. I'll be here regardless of what you decide to do. So take a little moment, get your base layer on the center there, take a break if you need to. And when we come back, we're going to hit those petals with some final details. And then we'll come in and work on that center just a little bit more. All right, I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we got a lot of dark paint in this brush, the big brush. So let's get it cleaned up. Good sweep, a little wiggle on the bottom there. Pat it dry. And I'm going to start again with that back row of petals. And the first thing I'm going to do is just pick up a little bit of that darker yellow and just kind of go over any spots that got a little bit too dark. You can even pick up a little bit of white with that I just start off with little bits and see what I like and what's working for me. So tiny bits of white, a little bit more of that yellow, and at that top little sort of tip section of the petal, and let it fade as it comes down. That brightened it up quite a bit. We can see the difference here between these other ones that we haven't done. So we're just going to play with that little bits. You don't want to redo every petal all over again. Small amounts. Just little bits. Pace yourself. You want to go easy. Ooh, see there, I had a little bit more white than I care for. Grab a little more yellow. There we go. And I let them just sort of fade off as I work my way down toward that darker section. I don't want to lose all that shadow I put in, but I want it to just not be quite so dark. And now, if you like, even a little bit of that metallic gold. It won't show up very much while it's wet. You can see I'm just putting in a few little hits of it. Didn't even clean my brush. Just grab a few little hits. Once that dries, it'll get shiny. So go easy. You don't want to go crazy with it. Oh, you can see the shine really well there. See how that just came to life? So take a moment. Use little bits of paint at a time. If you find that you've done something dastardly that you just can't deal with, hit it with the blow dryer. Wet paint is only going to make it worse. So dry it and then come back and try it again. If you want, you can even switch to the smaller brush, and that'll give you a little bit more definition in how you apply those little bits of gold and those little bits of highlight. But I'm going to move on to that front row. So whenever you're ready, we'll move on. Here we go. All right, I'm just going to sweep off that excess paint. I don't want to wash my brush entirely. Just sweeping it off. And just as I did with that back row, I'm going to start with just a little bit of yellow, my base color. And just try to give it one more little bit of oomph. Remember, I only did 2 layers on this first row. So adding little bits of yellow, and I can come in with little tiny bits of white, or even a little of that darker yellow, or a little bit of gold. It's entirely up to you. I like to just sort of use a combination of all of them, but use that gold pretty much last. And remember, the more you add, the more it's all going to kind of become a whole new color. So take your time and go easy, tiny bits of paint. They're not big spaces. We don't need a lot. And then we only do little bits at a time. We don't have to clean up big messes, you know. Let's see, add a little bit of white there. Just a little streak. And you can see I'm just fiddling, just little bits. Every stroke is going to be just a little bit different, but we're following that same principle. Base color, maybe little hints of darker yellow in there to give it just a little bit of shadow so it's not quite so bright, especially down at the bottom where we would have a little more shadow on that underside. And just working my way around. Have confidence in yourself. Figure out one, figure out what works for you, and then move on to that next one. Little bits. Cleaning off my brush there, adding little streaks. Sometimes the spirit just moves you, you know, when you're painting. You're just like, oh, I need a hit of highlight there. And then you get carried away. It happens. Oh, I got a little bit of that darkness in here. I'll just smooth it out. And now I think I'm just going to add little bits of gold. In the camera, these are appearing really white, I can see. Let me try to move that for you a little bit. I'll bring it a little closer. You can see they're yellow. It's just the way the lights are hitting them. Let me try to put that back without causing a crisis. There we go. Got a little gold. Same as before. Just hit it with little streaks. Once we get done with the center, nothing's going to stop you from going back and taking another whack at it if you want. You can add little bits as long as you like. That's the beauty about doing this at home. So you can take your time and make different decisions. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm going to leave them alone. So I'm going to take a moment and clean out my brush and come back, and we're going to finish up with the center of that flower. So we're almost there. Take your time though. Have a drink. Get a little snack. I don't need you getting hangry. That just messes up your art. So I'll see you in a second. Okay. All right. Let's clean out this brush, shall we? Good wiggle and jiggle there on the bottom of our cup. Drag those edges. Now, I'm going to start off with my brown and black mix. Now, if you need more, it's 2 parts brown to 1 part black. I have plenty left here. So I'm just going to take a little dip in it, and I'm going to come around the edge of my flower and tap. And there's a lot of tapping involved here. And your circle's going to get off, sort of off a little bit. That's fine. These are sunflower seeds. They grow in a pattern, but they're not all going to be exactly the same size. And we're just worrying about the edge for now. Tap your way around. I'm just sort of coming down. You can see on the corner of that brush and stippling little taps. Things might get a little wonky. That's okay. We can fix them later. And then I'm going to start working my way in. And I push a little harder as I work my way in. Get a little more surface covered. Really bounce that brush. We're done with all our detail work, so it can get a little bit hairy. And we're just pouncing our way across. We're getting a second layer of that brown and mix along our center here. And we're going to add some more colors to it in a little bit to create some shape. But for now, this layer is about the texture. So we're just bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. Got the bottom slat done, got the top slat done. Now I'm coming through the middle. I'm not worrying about the cracks with the slat or with the bouncing. I don't want to ruin my brush entirely. So I'm just going to keep working my way around here. With those tappity taps, there we go. And that's all I need to do. That's it. Just tap that through. It's going to give it some texture. Whoops, almost knocked over my light there. So I'm not going to clean my brush, but I am just going to sweep off any excess paint for my next layer, which is going to be some brown and then some gold. So give yourself some time to get through that. Remember, it does not need to be perfect. It's all about just roughing up those edges. Let me pull this a little closer so that you can see. All right, there we go. See that little edge? That just using that little corner, boop, 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 will give you that shape. And you can see as I move it around, there's some texture to that paint. That's what we want. So I'm going to pop this back on the easel. And you do not want this layer to dry before we move on to the next one. So don't blow dry it. Just go ahead and get this layer on and then pick up with me as soon as you're ready. Okay. So for the second, or I guess this would be the third layer, we've put 2 coats of that dark brown and black mix on there. I've wiped off my brush. I'm going to get just a little bit of brown by itself. And what I want to do is start down here in the lower left corner in the center, where my sunflower center would probably be the roundest with its curve and work my way out. We know that there's sort of a dip down in here. We'll get there. We'll come back and put it in. But what I want to do is start working my way in sort of these curved passes, following that same arc, and work my way toward that outer edge. And the mix that we had down first is still a little bit wet, so we're going to get some blending. And that tapping is kind of annoying. So I'm going to hold on to this with my hand and just work my way around. And I'm not going to come all the way to the edge. I'm going to get, I don't know, just about an inch from it. And then let that just fade out. Just lightly tap so that that can stay a little bit darker. Just let that fade out. And we're not going to have huge distinctions in color here. We're just trying to create a little bit of depth. Now let me see if I can pull this off again. Bring that closer. Do you see that texture? Oh, look at how yummy that is. All that texture. That's what we're going for. And again, we're going to do one more step now, and then it's complete. We're going to put that gold highlight here in that center. But again, we have to do that before the center is completely dry. So work on your brown, bounce that brush around, get that texture in there. Don't brush it, because then you're going to get a smooth texture. We want that pulling of the paint as those bristles lift and move to create that surface. And then you don't even need to clean your, let's clean this brush. When you're there, get your brush clean one more time and dry it off. We'll go into the gold next. So when you're ready, we'll hit it and we'll be done. I'll see you in a second. All right, this is it. We're gonna do that last step with our metallic gold. Now let's focus here on where we're going to put that. We want it to be sort of in this middle section of the arc, because this is going to sort of be a little bit of a pit or a valley in the shape. And then this will be raised and this curves back and away from us, so it's got shadow. So I'm just going to grab some gold and find my middle sort of section here and start tapping. And at first it's going to be really bright and really bold. That happens, just keep moving it around. The more you tap, the more it's all going to blend in. So go easy. You don't want to create more work, because if we lose that depth, then we've got to go back and put it in again. So we can take another pass at this layer, but that little bounce and lift is going to give you that sunflower seed sort of shape and texture. And I know I said that this gold might be our final step, but we can always come back in and darken this little valley here up a little bit too. I think that might help. Keep tapping, working your way around. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Sorry about the tapping noise. Okay. See how bold those are? But if I come back around, just give them another couple little taps. They smooth out. And that's what we want. Just that texture. We don't need to paint every single individual sunflower seed. We're not going for realism here. We're going for expressionism. Okay. Little taps. And sometimes I just find a little spot and add a few little extras just to give it a little bit more brightness. And that's about it. I think I need a little bit more up here. Let that fade its way out. But it's pretty good. And now I just have very little on my brush, Just do a few little taps out toward the edge, letting it stay really faint. I don't want to pick any paint up. I just want to pop little tiny bits of gold around there so that it's not quite such a stark difference. But that gives me that shiny little shimmery center that I wanted. So I think finally I'm just going to pick up a tiny touch of black and tap that around here in the very little center to just create a little more depth there. Not a lot, but that's it. That's all we need. Let me pick that up and bring it forward. So there's our sunflower. Here's the original. This I think is a little bit more muted. I did that by just taking the tip of my finger. And where I felt like it was just a little too bright, you can just sort of pat that out. But it's not necessary. Now you still have your small brush. You can always use that to sign your piece. I feel like I need a little bit more highlight in a few of these petals. So I'm going to use my small brush for that. Maybe just a little bit of yellow. There we go, a little bit of white. Just a few quick little hits. Sort of break it up a bit, because I feel like that yellow is just super solid. So my goal here isn't to change a lot, but just to add that little curve there. Yeah. And at this point, take your time, fiddle with that piece. Now remember, if there's something you want to change, let it dry. You can always blow dry it, but come back in and add another layer to it. The more you mix wet paint, the more you end up with one new color, and you're not going to get that desired effect. So I hope you had a good time. I had a great time. Come on over to Facebook and join my painting group, Paint with Mel and Friends. You can find me as Paint with Mel on all the social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Pick out your next project and order it. I can't wait to paint with you again. Please send me photos. You can send them to any of my social media sites, or you can email me. Everything's on the website. So hope you had fun. I can't wait to see what you did, and I can't wait to paint with you again soon. Take care, you guys. All right, be well.